Good morning, good afternoon, Hiraya Manawari. This is Shermon Cruz, currently the APF chair and the vice president of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society as well. So before anything else, I would like to provide a context to this session. This session will introduce Hiraya foresight and exhibit the case of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society in democratizing futures knowledge, access to capacities through impact research, education, training, and advocacy. We will explore and discuss indigenous finding ways and tools to reconceptualize foresight and its impact by fostering creativity, ethical imagination, anticipatory governance, leadership, and socio-civic praxis. The Philippine Futures Thinking Society is an institutional member of the Association of Professional Futurists, and just recently, the APF and the PhilFutures have signed an agreement for dual membership to provide professional futures and foresight competency in the Philippines. Since last year, the PhilFutures Network and Voice in the Philippines and the world and the larger global foresight community, I would say, have grown considerably, if not exponentially. So we will be exploring a lot of questions. We will be discussing the journey of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society, and there are several, of course, provocations and questions that we would like to discuss and share with our partners and colleagues and friends in Latin America. Like, for example, how might we build or trigger interest in the public and in the private sector and build an anticipatory nation? What are the sweet spots, the core unique element that we could leverage as a developing country to succeed and win in the push and pull of advocating futures and foresight in the public sector and governance, particularly in public policy, and enunciate, promote advocacy for activism? And how might indigenous myth and narratives give birth to authentic, noble, and liberating realities about the future? And of course, I'm particularly interested on how can we translate social and political access into wicked and transformative opportunities to promote and advance futures thinking, and how might we make foresight, futures literacy, purposeful and regenerative, and of course, socially transformative. So let me introduce to you my friends and my partners at the Philippine Futures Thinking Society. One would be, of course, Dr. Lizan Perante-Calina, who is currently the president of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society and the vice president and dean at the Graduate School of Public and Development Management at the Development Academy of the Philippines. I would also like to introduce Mr. Emmanuel de Guia, who is currently the resident futurist at the Senate Committee on SDGs, Innovation and Futures Thinking in the Philippines. And last but not the least, Dr. Reginald Ugaddan, who is our corporate secretary and director for research on futures and the Millennium Project, and the director of the National College of Public Administration and Governance at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Without further ado, I would like to hand this over now to Dr. Lizan Perante-Calina. Good morning, Dean.
Good morning, Shermon. Good morning to everyone. Buenos dias. And this morning, we're going to present our initiatives on futures thinking, and that's particularly futures in action in the Philippines. So let me share my presentation. I hope you can see now the deck. All right. Okay, so basically, we started with our futures thinking initiatives last 15 months ago, and that is really all about democratizing futures thinking. So within that 15 months, we introduced so many knowledge co-creation activities, and now we are in the second stage, which is deepening futures. And later on, we'll be able to institutionalize that and harvest our futures for the Philippines. So what's unique in the Philippines is its indigenization, and we're able to find an appropriate word, which is hiraya. And later on, I'll give a brief introduction, and my colleagues likewise here. What is this hiraya all about? But then this indigenous concept leads us to a more intimate features thinking action in the Philippines. So that hiraya is really an ancient Filipino word that gives the potential of the future or of tomorrow to illuminate on the present. It talks about kinabukasan. Kinabukasan is our future. Kinabukasan is tomorrow. So with that, hiraya glows and radiates. And of course, when we say hiraya as a wish to someone, it is all about saying, may you reach your dreams, may the wishes of your heart be granted, and hope it comes to pass. And hiraya in its multiple meaning significances and meaning implications, hiraya can be turned into vision. Hiraya is about cooperation and collaboration, and that in Filipino, it's about bayanihan or balikatan. And Hiraya is also anticipatory and agile leadership and governance. And of course, equally important to all these things that we're doing is that the ethical dimension of it. That's why Hiraya implies wisdom and ethics in action. And likewise, of course, because we should be evidence-based, Hiraya implies that the future can be studied, analyzed, researched, and planned. So how are we going to institutionalize and systematize Hiraya in the Philippines? So basically, it's all about research, education, training, and advocacy. And Hiraya is likewise about communication. Communication is a key ingredient in public administration and governance. And when we say communication, it's really all about how are we going to put the right message across. So it's about greeting someone with Hiraya Manawari is clearly communicating a friendly message, and it demonstrates the personal feeling from the bottom of our hearts, and it's really about genuine communication. Likewise, as I mentioned earlier, Hiraya is ethical, and this is geared towards the common good of the citizens, the well-being of the people for their beloved country, the Philippines, for that matter. So our Hiraya story is all about these dynamic individuals who compose the team, and for the past 12 months, 15 months, we're able to gather a number of volunteers and Hirayans who are into now the so-called Futures in Action. And of course, we started with the launching of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society. This is a social movement as we consider it now because of so many stakeholders who are involved, not only from the government sector, but also privately. We have individuals, we also have individuals from the youth sector. So this one, we continue with our features conversation with the youth as well, as I mentioned, as well as with the education sector. And we collaborated with UNESCO on the features of education, learning to become. And we're able to had a conversation with many stakeholders from different parts of the globe, and we're happy that we're able to present our Hiraya story before UNESCO during its UNESCO Futures Literacy Summit and the global full spectrum features in action. And this one is a collage of what happened in the last 15 months. As you can see, we're also collaborating with the House of Representatives, the higher officials of the government, likewise with the military sector, and with all other stakeholders in the country. And this is an additional collage of our story. And this is basically with state universities and colleges who are now into futures thinking. This one, it's with the military sector. And at the AP Graduate School, we established the so-called Future Studies platform. And that Future Studies platform is a is a platform wherein we channel all our conversations about futures thinking in relation to public administration and governance, and likewise our Hiraya Talks. And the Hiraya Talks is about an open space for experts from different parts of the world. And of course, this was the latest activity that we had. And this is the so-called Fiesta of Imagination. So as you can see, there are so many logos participated and shown in this slides, right? And a lot more. For the first few months, we're able to present before the Senate Committee on Sustainable Development Goals and innovations and futures thinking shared by our senior fellow, Senator Pia Cayetano. And we're able to present this indicative framework on foresight, and of course, also our initiatives on the education sector, health, and a lot more. So with that, we're able to generate support from the House of Representatives with Senator Pia Cayetano, with Congresswoman Geraldine Ruman, who was then our student at DAP Graduate School. Of course, Sohail Inayatullah was there during that time. And with that, Senator Pia wants to institutionalize futures thinking in the Philippines. Funding from the government is now with national agencies in order to really support this undertaking, which is applying futures thinking as a lens in policy development. And also, we are part of the Millennium Project, and we are the 64th node. And we are glad that we're doing futures research studies right now. And regarding that, we are also at the other and we are supported by the Senate on really systematizing Hiraya through research. And this is on SDGs and futures thinking. We're already on our second phase, which is on functionality and practicality. In the Philippines, we also introduced this framework, the Futures Leadership and Governance Framework, which is embedded in our different programs. And as you can see there, we have futures thinking, we have Hiraya, that's the indigenous part, and then the knowledge co-creation. We believe that through knowledge, we will be able to generate action and of course, create social innovation and agility in the organization. But at the end of the day, leadership matters. And in particular, we are looking at the general characteristics of a frenetic leader. And likewise, we embed our culture, our values, and our motto. So this features leadership and governance framework is a bid for a holistic approach to carving out desirable features really towards the common good and well-being of the Filipino people. So in the education and training part, we already gained around 100 plus emerging futurists through this certificate course on futures thinking. So we started in 2020 and it's still ongoing. So we will be on our fourth batch next year. So we are very happy that a number of our state universities and colleges presidents enrolled in this subject. And likewise, our top-level government officials. We have career executive officers and senior government officials who are also into futures thinking because of this CLICK program. And this CLICK program is all about leadership, innovation, communication, and knowledge management with futures thinking as a lens or a handle. And as I mentioned earlier, at GSPDM, that is our school, the Development Academy of the Philippines Graduate School, we have the Knowledge Innovation Hub Lab, and we have 6 platforms. And one, of course, is the Future Studies on Future Studies education. And these are some of the activities that we introduced. And Futures Thinking is incorporated in all our education and training programs. As you can see, we have executive courses in different aspects, including, of course, evidence-based policymaking for local officials. So how are we going to institutionalize futures thinking? As I mentioned earlier, we are receiving appropriations from the government to really institutionalize this. And likewise, we have working papers on future thinking and the sustainable development goals, particularly on SDG 4, 11, 12, 16. No? And this one is from Shermon. He's doing a study on resilient to regenerative city features, reimagine Philippine cities in 2050 through scenarios and causal layered analysis. And we continue with our Hiraya talks and our certificate course, and hopefully we'll be able to launch a master's degree program on future studies. And of course, local government units are integral to us. We are starting our collaboration with them by sharing the importance of foresight and futures thinking in policy making. And also, we are partnering with private universities in the Philippines, just like the University of Santo Tomas. And these slides are our activities or work activities with the youth sector, with our students, and of course with the private sector as well, with the Philippine National Council of Non-Government Organizations. And we're given also the chance to share our ideas, insights, and perspectives with the Philippine accountants and with the Philippine civil engineers of here in the Philippines, of course, and with SEC, our Securities and Exchange Commission, that is the lead agency regulating our investments and the economy as well. And of course, this is with the military sector. So how are we going to institutionalize these efforts and sustain the gains that have been introduced in the past years? So it is really through certificate courses, the masterclass, and continue with our moonshots. So as of now, we are still on foresight education, research, training, and advocacy. And the home for this is the field of public administration in the Philippines. And this is our latest activity, which is Reimagining Sustainable Development Features Today, a research activity funded by the Philippine government. So with that, I'd like to say, Hiraya Manawari, thank you for listening. Muchas gracias. On to you, Sherman.
Thank you, Lizan, for giving us some or several snapshots about what's going on Hiraya foresight in the Philippines. Now, I would like to hear from my colleagues here, Noel and Reggie, about perhaps share some of their insights and experiences, personal experiences, the lessons learned and insights about the journey that PhilFutures had since its inception regarding futures and foresight and anticipatory practice. Perhaps we can start with Noel.
Yeah, good morning. Buenos noches and buenos dias to everybody. I'm Emmanuel de Guia. I'm the resident futures for the Philippine Senate right now. I'd like to ask Nicole to share the screen. Thank you. Since last year, our committee on the Senate Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovations, and Futures Thinking has funded 6 state universities and colleges in the Philippines to start their futures journey. Here are some examples of the universities that were given funds by our committee for the futures of food systems and futures of artificial intelligence in the Philippines. This is the futures of Futures Thinking Masterclass for one of the top universities in the Philippines, the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. They're now doing the artificial intelligence futures in the Philippines. That's the cohort with Sherman on the screen. Next, please. We also have the Central Luzon State University Futures Thinking Masterclass, which is all about the futures of food system, especially on tilapia. Next, please. Now they have the future of tilapia and the future of price at CLSU. We also have another state university down in the Visayas region, the Visayas State University. They're doing a global food systems review, especially for sweet potato and jackfruit. now you could see we have commodity futurists, we have cacao futurists. It has been ongoing for the past year that state universities are creating their own futures offices, especially in agriculture. They have the specific futures team doing research on kamote or sweet potato, rice, also on jackfruit, and also on cacao. Next, please. This is the Euclid Banyas Futures Thinking Masterclass. They're now doing futures on Sustainable Development Goals number 12, which is sustainable consumption and sustainable production and responsible consumption. We have now developed around 300 futurists all over the state universities in the Philippines. Here's my principal, Senator Pia Cayetano, who's the chairperson of the Committee on SDGs, Innovation Futures Thinking. She's been with us in the journey, joining the state universities in their master classes and provoking them into thinking about the futures of the various food systems. That's the cohort, again with Shermon. So right now, this coming November 12 to 14, we're going to start the first Philippine Futures Education, Work and Technology Summit that will highlight the various possibilities of work and technology in 2050. Okay, thanks for sharing, Nicole. So right now,
thank you for, yes.
Yeah, go ahead. By next year, we intend to fund another 20 state universities colleges in developing their own futures team on public health, governance, and I think one on marine and biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel, for sharing that story and some updates and futures thinking and foresight, particularly Hiraya foresight, continues to expand and deepen in terms of engagement and scholarship. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Reggie about this and his reflections on your personal experience, insights, and lessons learned, Dr. Reggie, as a scholar. Particularly, we've always been discussing about the niche, the novelty that is emerging as far as futures and foresight is concerned. Dr. Reg.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Sherman. I think we have a lot to stories to share here in the Philippines since its inception last year, and until now, while Dean Lizan was presenting the whole, the story that we had here in the Philippines, in the FilFutures Thinking Society. I'm still getting some goosebumps because it was really a kind of it started with short steps, right? With little steps there, and now you can see a sort of a movement. I think it's trying towards trying to move the citizens here in the Philippines. You can see the top level. the national government. From top to bottom, if you may, I think we can see that the propagation, the popularity that futures thinking, or the importance of integrating foresight in the government affairs. Now it's gaining from top to bottom, and you can also see how local governments and even civil societies and private sector organizations are joining this kind of movement. One thing that I would like also to share is that before, of course, in the University of the Philippines, particularly in the National College of Public Administration, right, we can, the futures thinker, strategic foresight, I think it was not really well discussed in the academy, particularly in the college. And now through Shermon and through our colleagues also in the FilFutures, we're able to bring in some courses now in the undergrad level, because that's one thing that we would like to bring, right, to popularize or to increase the competencies of our future leaders, not only those who are in the government already, but also preparing our future leaders or future civil servants to have that competencies in futures thinking. That's why we have already opened up courses also for our undergraduate students here in the Philippines. So it's already in the second year through Shermon, and maybe later on some colleagues also will be joining, teaching futures thinking, strategic foresight in policy making, and others that we would like, of course, to bring that strong, foundation on futures thinking and be used as a lens or a handle in dealing with public policies here in the country. Chairman.
Just to add to that, Reggie, right now there are about 5 national government agencies that established their own futures offices. First is the Department of Education, the Department of Health, Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Interior Local Government, and we're being swamped by requests for funding for national government agencies, especially by the National Development Agency. They would want the agencies to establish their own futures offices because they've seen how foresight and futures thinking had helped the Philippines during the past pandemic, during the current pandemic. Because with futures thinking initiative, we're able to help on how to bring in scenarios, how to bring in new lenses in battling COVID. And just recently, this African swine fever, where Shermon and Lizan were invited to talk as futurists on how to combat these emerging diseases in the country right now.
Yeah, apparently, as I see it, it seems that futures thinking and foresight has begun to some sort of re-energize, public policy in terms of meaning making and analysis, and it is driving national government agencies to innovate. And there is apparently a network that's going on, at least within the system. Your thoughts on this, Din Lizan?
Yeah, speaking of re-energize, that's an important aspect, especially today that we are on a lockdown. And re-energizing means really it's all about being imaginative, being creative, and likewise collaborate with our various stakeholders. And I'm happy really to note that just 2 days ago, we were with the Department of Interior and Local Government, right? And we presented Hiraya Foresight as a framework to implement the Mandanas ruling. So the Mandanas ruling is all about adding funding for LGUs through the internal revenue allotment. And there were positive positive comments, and of course the acceptance was really vibrant. And for them, it's really about re-energizing the Philippine bureaucracy, because for them it's a new fresh idea, although it's not, right? We've been talking about futures thinking decades ago, but in the Philippines it's something new that they really want to embrace, because they want to create a better future. They want to introduce change. They want to really co-create new ideas that would really improve the policy development in the Philippines. And aside from that, we also receive a number of invitations from our national government agencies. And this one is, as mentioned by Noel earlier, will lead to the institutionalization or the creation of offices in the respective agencies on futures thinking. The technical vocation agency is also into this one right now. So we are preparing a concept note for them, so that they will be able to introduce futures thinking. And likewise, Senator Pia, during the Senate budget hearing yesterday or the other day, talked about creating or doing a scenario planning with cultural agencies. So meaning to say that it's all across sectors now, right? It's not only with the key agencies in the Philippines like health, right? It's also with the cultural agencies. And I think in the next coming months, we'll be able to to train and change the mindset, of course, from short-termism to long-term approach, and that is really anticipatory as we will embrace 2022 with new set of leaders because we'll be having our national and local elections very soon. Yeah, thank you, Sherman.
Yes, and reflecting now, I realized that the Philippine Futures Thinking Society approach to democratizing futures knowledge and access is pretty heavy on action learning, right? So you have knowledge, you try to explore and experience the meaning of what we're talking about in terms of concept through action. And then apparently we had several conversations and reflections about meaning making and making sense of local mythologies, to inform strategy and emergence. Your thoughts on this, Noel and Reggie, when it comes to the idea of building on local mythology and meaning, and of course, as Noel mentioned, authorship and ownership in the process of foresight.
Yes. One thing that we've learned and discovered during our foresight and futures thinking with the city universities is that they would want to have an anchor on the story of what their futures might be. They want it to be authentic. So there has to be authorship. They make their own story via their own folklores, by their own methodology, and they develop those folklores, those methodology as a handle for the future. So it's like a marriage of the past, present, and the future, in creating their own methodology. For example, the Visayas State University, they would want to make sweet potato as an anchor for the mythology, and the local mountain, the mountain behind them. They would want to have an anchor on the futures by creating stories about their past and then intermingling it with their future. So they were able to create songs, they were able to create poems about their futures, but not forgetting about their past. They have to be anchored on their roots, just like sweet potato. They want to be deep anchored in their history, in their past, so they can create their own futures. That's one wonderful thing about the State Universities, because they were able to make authentic stories of their own, not just borrowed stories about their futures, but their own. They're the authors of their own stories, and they're now the authors of their own futures. Thank you.
That's a good thinking, and it reminds me about the idea of decolonization. So, Reggie, any thoughts on that? Like the question about authorship, ownership, and decolonization?
Yeah, I think what I can share in this question, Sherman, is that we've been doing also scenario building or planning with local government officials. And, the story really is that they will look or find something that's really deeply rooted with the culture. When they try to establish, for example, the current scenario, looking at, of course, the stories, and try to bring, of course, that kind of the future. You can observe that it's highly contextualized. I mean, bringing in, of course, ideas and also their aspirations, and the futures are really embedded with the culture. Right? You can see some examples of their interesting, of course, on my part, in facilitating those workshops with them, bringing, for example, Mount Araya, using some mountains. I mean, from the Philippines, trying to build that kind of future, reflecting the characteristics of mountains here in the country. I mean, that's something really, I think, what PhilFutures have been bringing into the discussion. I mean, trying to democratize this, trying to bring or to really educate people, right? To bring what's really us, or what's really ours, I should say, and to own a future that's really reflective of the Philippine cultures, the aspirations and the norms that we have here. I think this is one way also trying to bring the very own, right, a contextualizer, an aspiration that's really deeply rooted with what we want really as a citizen, or a Filipino, I think that's one thing that we would like, that we can also bring into the discussion, right? You've mentioned about decolonizing the futures, right? And Filipinos are having their own futures. I mean, exciting, of course, interestingly, looking at how our local government officials are trying to build that kind of scenarios in the future.
That's interesting, Reggie, because apparently since the PhilFutures inception and with all of these activities and programs that has been emerging in the process, is that it seems like there is a process, of or collective intelligence of trying to figure out how might we make local mythologies evolve in a way that it incorporates the idea of science fiction. Right, you have local mythology plus science fiction equals Hiraya futures, right? Trying to imagine what would the story be like in the next 30, 50, or 100 years, and using, the elements that they have and have influenced the Filipino civilization for thousands of years, even during the pre-colonial period, like the idea of gold and boat and ocean and the cosmos, those elements that defines indigenous belief and indigenous systems. Now, the next question that I would like to ask is about, the idea of a values-based foresight, and the concept of making foresight events and activities as they are significant in terms of policy and advocacy strategy, but then there is also the view of leadership and community. Any thoughts on this about values-based foresight and those things that we normally have a conversation on about this? Perhaps President Lizan would like to give her thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's very important, values-based. And as I mentioned earlier, when we introduced foresight here in the Philippines, what's being unique is we anchored it on leadership. And in particular, for now, we anchored it via frenetic leadership, because frenetic leadership is also all about wise and ethical leadership with universal values, wherein you see goodness when you decide for a certain policy or you make decision. You always consider your decision based on goodness, based on your tacit knowledge, based on your observation, and you consider your environment, of course, your experiences. But we always say that leadership is based in context, right? But then again, what is important there is the ethical values, no? The ethical values that we need to incorporate in decision making. And being a futurist, meaning to say you are also ethical, right? You always want to see, you want to see goodness in all actions. So that is a judgment based on goodness. Likewise, you base your decisions towards the common good. You are looking at the societal purpose. You are looking at the well-being of the Filipino people. That's why in the framework earlier, wherein these frameworks are also incorporated in our MPM, now master's degree program, we always emphasize that equally important to the tools that you learn are ethical values. So at the end of the day, you are an ethical public servant. Now, of course, it will not only apply to the public sector, but as well to the private sector. So that's really the imperatives of an ethical leadership in the Philippines. And as mentioned by the team, we will be developing Hiraya leadership as well. So we are under study, no, on what are the general characteristics that we can set as indicators to become a Hiraya leader. So that is our social responsibility, indigenizing the frameworks that will really suit the Filipino values. Until you, sure.
Yes, you are actually right, Dean. While, for example, Futurists uses or use drivers of change, as scenario logic in imagining alternative futures, there are leaders and movements that change the conditions of change. Sometimes futurists and foresight practitioners neglect that driver of change, that leaders and movements and people actually drives the conditions of change. So the idea of reclaiming the power of the human agency to influence and inspire action to create the future that they desire is more often than not overlooked, particularly on the idea of values. And now I would like to hear from Reg and Noel. Feel free to jump in about the idea of values-based foresight. And in fact, in the conversation that we've been having, there are new things, new metaphors, new ideas that are emerging in the PhilFutures societal approach and action learning process, which is, of course, the idea of makatha leadership and the concept of kababaang loob, or humility. Your thoughts on that, Noel, Reggie?
Yeah. Makata is being created, and Makata is also Makata of being a poet. Right now, what we're trying to develop is to create policy poets, especially in the Senate and Congress. We want them to have that sense of creativity in crafting laws and in crafting policies that incorporates, first of all, humility. Why humility? Because with humility, you're open to all possibilities. You're open to all new ideas. Without humility, you're just one track mind. You're blinded, just like a horse, right? With blinders. But with humility, we experienced in the Senate, you accept the fact that you cannot control all things, that you cannot have a handle on all things. But there are possibilities. You can anticipate these possibilities, and that gives you humility. That there are greater powers in front of you that you may be able to use to get a handle on those possibilities. Just like with the pandemic. Because before, with the pandemic, we don't have any clear idea on how it will end. Until now, we don't have an exit strategy for COVID-19. But with the help of the Philippine Society and the Senate, we're able to give them scenarios. We're able to give them possibilities on how might questions. So they are now more accepting. They are now more open to new ideas, because before they don't have any. They just would like, for example, they would just Google, they would just ask experts from other countries, but they don't have their own ideas on how to end it. But when we started to talk to senators, we were able to see, of course, this is a possibility that we might have to handle. I've talked with the Department of Health, with the federal government. Now they have some sort of horizon, possibilities ahead of them that they can pick and choose amongst. Like it's a menu. Which one will I use? Which one will I be able to utilize to create the future that you want post-COVID? Thank you.
That's a pretty interesting insight, Noel. And Doc Reg, you might want to add to the idea of shifting policy managers, transforming them to become policy poets. Is that possible?
We hope that we can have policy poets, right, in our policymakers. But I would like also to add on that discussion. Lizan have already mentioned about the job that we are doing here in the PhilFutures, trying to democratize the competencies. It's not only for the citizens that we need really to direct our efforts to our leaders, that like what we are doing now, right? That they can really embody this value-based, or what I can say, this value-based should be added with that citizen-centric. Lizan has been talking this about many times. It should be people-centric or citizen-centric futures plus that value-based, and you could possibly bring that kind of value-based that you will really embody or present what the people really wants to help for the future. This is what we've been talking about right here in PhilFutures: anticipatory governance, and also a futures that really represents the aspirations. That's the hiraya of our people here in the country, right? So value-based can can be, can be strengthened, right, or can be enhanced if that is centered, or that if that was developed, or that was, being, brought through a citizen-centric approach as well to the futures. I think that that's one thing that I can add to that the discussion. The frenetic leadership is a very good handle that can really encapsulate that kind of vision, that can bring that kind of futures, of value-based futures. Here in the country, as you may already know, there are lots of mechanisms that we've been, the policy, the government, or even laws that have established a sort of citizens' participation in all aspects, or all fields, or all sectors, or all areas in governance. However, we still have to really, bring that kind of effective mechanism that can really bring that perspective of citizen-centric and value-based policy making, and of course a futures that we would like futures that we can have, that we would like to have, reflecting those two important values that we'd like to, that I'm mentioning. Yes, Sherman.
Yes, that's a good point. In fact, I just read yesterday an article published by Futurism that the blind spot of futurist and futures practice is the cultural and the values-based perspective. Recently, in a conversation that I attended that was hosted by the Dubai Future Foundation, one of the things that has emerged as far as a driver of change when it comes to futures and foresight is the values perspective, not the value perspective, but the values perspective. And then they've also, some of the participants sees a future wherein global interactions and exchange in terms of economy, politics, policy at the global level. One of the possibilities is that there could emerge as some sort of a values-based multilateralism, because the world, the planet, has to make sense of integrating the view of that trust do matter when it comes to building a global community, and values-based perspective can fuel that agenda of building a high trust global community in the 21st century. So there are a lot of things that we need to map and define, because it's still on its early stage, like how might a values-based foresight emerge and how does it look like? And for the Philippine Futures Thinking Society, it's emerging, and we continue to learn. Your thoughts on this, Dean Lizan?
Yeah, that's right. No, I really agree with that. And I think well, our the futures in action in the Philippines is really well accepted, and it's emerging. And aside from that, also we need to capacitate, right? We need to capacitate, because we are going now to answer the question how are we going to operationalize futures thinking in the Philippines? Meaning to say, it's really about action now. So one is really capacitating our local officials. And I would like to go back to the point that we would like to create a community of policy poets. They are integral in policy development and in long-term thinking, and also for them, to promote thought leadership. Another, of course, is the mentoring and coaching. As you all know, we are doing the mentoring and coaching. We have interns from state universities and local universities and colleges, the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Valenzuela, and also UP NCEPAG. We have active college students who are helping us now, and some of them are doing their future studies through the courtesy of Sherman, of course, and other global futurists. So really, the part that we are mentoring, coaching, and capacitating them are now is now being institutionalized. So we hope in the next few months we'll be able to create a bigger community of practitioners, so that we'll be able to really touch the the minds, no, and change the mindsets and the values of our leaders and well, everyone, no, in the country as much as possible. Um, we want a big percentage and active, actually, and active action futurists in the country in the next coming months.
Okay, so just checking at the time, we have a pretty nice comments in the chat, and I would like to read them now. From Amelia Paje, we need to develop competence and futures thinking in our educational system. I believe it should be from the primary level to the tertiary level, integrating introductory and or enhancement courses leading to understanding, deepening, and provoking the young to take action for a future-ready Philippines in the generations to come. And then from Grace, I'm excited as a teacher to adopt futures thinking as a perspective or methodology in education. Thank you for that, Grace. And from Marco, this is a question that perhaps you might want to quickly reply to. What is your main recommendation when it comes to make sense of foresight or provoke interest about it to local legislators and city mayors? Recommendations from you folks? Thoughts?
Yeah. Can I take the first okay,
Sure.
the first shot? You know what? Changing their mindsets or really getting them is one of the difficult things now. This is one of the constraints, actually, because the culture, no, or the mindset of short-termism. But one thing is based on experience. You have to do it, you have to build it first, build it, show to them that this is possible, and they will just follow. So it's really all about action, from concepts, right, from concepts and frameworks to action. If they see that you are doing something and they see that it's solid, then they will just participate. And we're seeing that kind of participation. That's one of the constraints, really, no? The changing of the mindset for the local leaders and legislators. But we are glad that they have an open mind now, and we've touched a number of individuals at the local level already. And we are thankful that the Department of Interior and Local Government is with us with this kind of initiative. Yeah, Noel.
Yeah. Noel? Thanks,
With
Lee.
our case at the Senate, one thing that provoked them, the one provocation that we asked them during because right now it's the budget hearings, the budget session at the Senate for the national agencies. We tied their budget with futures thinking because we want to know what their plans are, the future plans are. We also want their budget to be scenario based. What might happen if this budget is not given? What might happen if this budget is given? So it creates interest in their imagination because futures thinking is tied up with their budget. They cannot get much budget if they don't have futures thinking in their plans or foresight or anticipatory governance into their plans. That's why right now agencies and bureaus of government have incorporated futures thinking into their budget because we look into it. We want to see if they have futures plans, if they have capacity development for futures thinking, if they have anticipatory scenarios development built into the budget. Without that, they can't get much more.
Oh, that's good, Noel. No, it reminds me of Swahil Inayatullah when he said that the grass is greener where you water it. Yeah, the grass is greener where you water it. So, that's a pretty novel idea from the Senate, no, wherein, budget should be scenario based. Pretty interesting.
Yes, because
yeah, thoughts?
Yes.
Yep.
Because there is fun in fund.
Yes, of course. Yeah, actually, that has always been the issue. Resources that drives futures and foresight and sustain it. Your thoughts, Doc Reg?
Yeah, I think two things only, Sherman. I mean, if we're going to look at the case of the Philippines, I mean, the local government officials here in the Philippines, there are two things. One is that phenomenon. I think it's a blessing in disguise for the pandemic that had happened. Second is that introduce them new strategies. I mean, the first thing there is that I think, I have been looking at the case of the pandemic being one of the the triggers of our local government to really look at what are they doing really. We've been into that old practice of doing things, I mean, in the government, I mean, in public policy as well. And I think they've seen this pandemic, that they really need to step up. They really need to look at ways to improve how they do things in the government. Second thing is that we need to introduce them strategies. I think this is what this is personally, I think for me, when you introduce them, this is strategic foresight of bringing this idea of scenarios, or maybe bring also these futures thinking tools in their policy making. They are being amazed, and that they should have learned this even before. That's what they are telling us. Why only now, right? And now with that one, when you introduce them this new strategies, or teaching them how to use these strategies or futures thinking tools in their policy making, now they're really into it. I think that's something I think we can say is interesting case here in the Philippines. That futurists are no longer that you have to introduce them. These are the scenarios. Now the local government's officials are actually reaching out to you to teach them how to do this. And how to really improve the policy making. I mean, the strategies of identifying first, an evidence-based and futures-oriented policy making strategies. I think those are the things that's happening here in the country nowadays. I mean, you may agree with that, or maybe Lizan and colleagues, Noel, we can agree on that that point. I mean, that's my take on this, Sherman.
Okay, thank you. So we have 4 minutes left, and perhaps we can extend for 2 minutes. So two things. Now I'm gonna close this session, and we'll ask Karen to play the PhilFutures Summit video for several minutes. Of course, what I'm seeing here are two basic foundational things in order to move futures thinking and foresight at a societal and political level. One is that action speaks louder than words. Second is that values are caught, not taught. So the two basic foundational concepts that we all believe in. Oh, so we're until 8:45. I'm sorry. So your final thoughts before I play the video, Dean Lizan, Noel, and Dr. Reggie.
Yeah,
And then before I hand it over to Mauricio for his comment and final words as well.
Yes. Final thoughts. This is a continuing activity. This is a continuing movement. And it is really all about, passion and commitment. And we are looking here, we initiated this futures thinking activity with no one pushing us, actually. So as I mentioned before, we are not really long-time friends. We just met during the pandemic, but somehow we know each other, But we have this common vision for the country, and we are seeing the gaps in governance and public administration, and the scholars and practitioners of public administration and governance. We see futures thinking as an appropriate tool and lens for us to really improve the policy development and somehow lessen the gaps. So here we are doing this advocacy. And because of this advocacy, we are embedding futures thinking in all our activities, in all our subjects, actually. And we are doing so many pro bono knowledge co-creation activities, as long as we can just share our ideas and influence positively the minds, change the mindsets, because changing the mindset is more remarkable than just looking at the policies. So it's very important, especially today. So join us in this advocacy. We need your passion and commitment to have a better future for the Philippines.
Yeah, Noel.
Yes, one of the most fortunate part of being a future is that we have a good anchor to start with Hiraya Foresight, with Hiraya Manawari. Because with Hiraya Manawari, we want it's a greeting. It's a greeting. it's a blessing. We want to bless everybody with a good future. So it started the ball rolling. What could be a better movement than something that wishes everyone to have a good future? So that started the ball rolling. It's starting to catch fire across the Philippines because people want to get best. People want to have a good future. And it's happening now because we're trying to capacitate them on how to think for the futures. Thank you.
That's a good thought, Noel. No, the future, the present is a gift. The future is a blessing. Yeah, Reg.
Yeah, I think only three things I think that I would like also to share. The lessons that we've learned here in PhilFutures is that our target is not to educate the society and even the leaders, and we are now, of course, arousing their arouse them, of course, towards the kind of futures that we would like. And later on, of course, we can mobilize them. That's why, in this kind of strategy, it's more of competency transfer in this level nowadays. But later on, these people, they will own their own their work. I mean, capacitating them first, and then later on they will have that we will, of course, occupy that space of the futures and discussions on the futures, that the citizens being on top of it. Right? That's more of a citizen-centric futures for the country. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Reg. And then before we play the video, yeah, I would like to, call Mauricio, of course, our host and the lead organizer of the APF Latin America event. Thank you, Mauricio, for giving us the opportunity and providing us the space to share the story of Viraya Foresight. Good morning, Mauricio.
Sherman. Oh, good morning for you. Good night, almost in here. But thank you very much for being with us. I think it is very important what you just have told us around this presentation that you just did, because, well, first of all, Sherman, hi, Lizan, Reggie, Emmanuel, very, very good to see you in this place. And when I first knew about the PhilFutures Thinking Society was last year, and I was watching what you guys were doing, all the work that you were doing with your politicians, for instance, with people in your country, just arousing people to like futures, to know what futures and foresight are. And I think that's a very important work. And you haven't stopped. You haven't stopped since then. And what I think is that this is a very good example of what we can reach and what we can do in a nation or in a region when we work towards this objective and towards making foresight and futures more important every time. And I didn't know, I must say, I didn't know Jose Rizal, for instance, until last year. And what first drew my attention was the fact that Jose Rizal, you got recollection and you got it registered that he was the first futurist in the Philippines. He's a national hero, as I understand. And that was very, very good to realize. But then I wrote a quote that I like, that I used in another event that I had, and I went with you guys. And I love this quote by him. I entered the future carrying a memory of the past. I really love that because I think that even though we are from different regions, different cultures, different continents of the world, I think we can share something like that, because we also are a very rich region in terms of history, in terms of culture, as you are in all Asia and of course in the Philippines. And I think this is what we should do. Like, okay, this is the past. This is what has happened before. Let's take the best of it. Let's take the best learning of that. And now let's project to the future. And I think that's something that we have to do in our region. And that's why I love the fact that you show us all the work that you have done and all these concepts that you have talked to us about this night for us. So thank you very much. I just wanted to appreciate the fact that you took this space, and I love it because I must say, some people told me like it's kind of strange, huh? Like having this space if in a Latin American event, right? But I I don't see that we have in our past we have very common identity. I mean, that's why you guys have this have your Latin names and all that, because we share something. We share the same. We shared kind of the same past very long ago, but still we were. We have a connection with with the Spanish past and all this, and I think we have more things in common that a lot of people can think about. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing these thoughts and these concepts with us, guys. And you're always welcome every time you want. We can have you. We can have your work. We want to see what you are doing, and I hope that we can share and we can cooperate and we can keep collaborating as we have done so far. So thank you all for your presentation tonight.
Thank you, Mauricio, for those wonderful insights and reflections. We'll also anchor on those experiences. Of course, we're looking forward to explore ways by which we can have some sort of a foresight exchange between Latin America and the Philippines and Asia as well. So again, thank you very much. But before we close this session, I would like to ask Nicole to play the video of the upcoming first Philippine Futures Thinking Summit event happening in November. And we would like to invite everyone here in Latin America to join us in this summit.
Of course.
The Future Summit is the first scenario and action-driven gathering on the futures of education, work, and technology in the Philippines. Inspired by the Millennium Project Work and Technology Report 2050, UNESCO's Learning to Become, global initiatives on futures literacy, and the hearings and proceedings of the Senate Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovations, and Futures Thinking, the Future Summit will reveal, reframe, reimagine, and consolidate strategies and insights on the futures of education, work, and technology. This gathering is centered on a human-focused, regenerative, nature-first, and indigenous perspective.
Inspired by UNESCO's Learning to Become, how will knowledge and learning can shape the future of humanity and the planet? What if today's learners become what they ought to become by 2050? What if learning becomes highly creative, imaginative, and neuroscience-driven? What if professors were knowledge entrepreneurs? What if non-traditional learning paths become the new norm? What if there are 1.5 billion content and knowledge creators by the year 2050? How might a multiversity look like?
What if our algorithms and developers have a deep sense and understanding of inclusivity, diversity, ethics, among other values that we cherish the most as human beings? How might we ensure open access, universal, and equitable coverage of frontier technologies for the benefit of humanity and the planet? How might we create frontier technologies with a conscience and build citizens' trust? Learning to learn, live, and work with frontier technologies in a highly interconnected world is both an opportunity and a challenge. The first PhilFutures Summit seeks to explore and discover these questions. And imagine, how might an augmented and virtual society look like in 2050?
Embarking from the Philippine Senate Resolution number 865, how might we prepare for changing the industry landscapes? How might we prepare for jobs that are not yet created? How might we foster change from an employment culture to a self-actualization culture? How might education and technology be used to strengthen the capacity of the workforce of the future? What are the strategies we might take to transform our human resources to be productive and self-actualized? What would transformation look like in public organization culture, structure, and processes? How might organizations strategize to become resilient and future-proof? How might workers and employers adapt to the changing norms and standards? What would the future of work look like in the public sector?
The PhilFutures Summit will be a virtual conference to spark conversations and gather intelligence, explore underlying issues, map emerging risks and opportunities, build future competencies and capabilities to craft anti-fraudulent programs and policy agenda.
The pamantasan ng lungsod ng Valenzuela takes pride in being the first local university and a founding institutional member of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society. Tara na, tayo'y maglayag tungo sa Hiraya 2050.
There you go. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mauricio.
Thank you. Thank you all for being with us. Iraya Manawari. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Saturday
Muchas
for you.
gracias.
Thank you very much,
Gracias,
Mauricio.
Mauricio.
Nada, gracias.
Thank
Muchas
you very
gracias.
much, Latin America. Thank you very
Iraya
much.
Manawari.